Alright, what's up guys? Tonight I wanted to go over my button box. Like I had talked about having a second video. I have custom built one for ATS. There are options out there and it's actually a decent looking box. I just really wanted to be a little bit more authentic, having true toggles and everything of that nature. And I also felt like I could design one that looked more like a Kenworth, which I used to drive. And it's a mid-90s Kenworth style, so I just wanted to go that route instead. It was definitely not as inexpensive as buying the other box, but then again I'm also using authentic equipment, short side of these of course, and I'll explain those here pretty shortly. So there are a lot of button box videos out there that talk about how to use an Arduino, or to use an Arduino. They tell you how to build the box, and hey, download this file to your Arduino, and boom, you have a 32 function box. Well, I mean, that's great, but if you want something that's more custom or more designed for a game such as ATS or ATS2, like I have here, that option you really have to understand programming, which I do not. And I really didn't want to delve too deeply into it right away, because I wanted to basically build a box and have fun and be able to enjoy it. So instead of using an Arduino, like if you were going to go that route, you'd basically be using something similar to, not that one, to the Arduino Micro, or some Chinese made variant, much like this guy right here. A lot of them that make them tend to do that. Of course, this one being an authentic Arduino, it actually has all the stuff already soldered on there and ready to go. But again, I really wanted to do something a little bit more authentic than what was currently available, either to purchase or the ones that from like AM Studios did a really cool video on both how to do the ignition and one of their own button boxes. And but for me, it just wasn't what I wanted, so I decided to do something completely custom built by me. And what I did was I used 3 of these guys, and these are essentially joystick controllers. They're called no delay or zero delay USB joystick encoder. Essentially you have your 12 connections right here, your 12 functions, and then you have up here you have a joystick function. Well, in the beginning I thought that, hey, cool, I got 4 more that I can use, and then I neglected to realize that with a joystick you can only go one way of the 4 at a time. So because of the reason, or because of the way that I use these, there are 3 of these, I actually have a 35 function button box plus another 3 functions to cover the shifter, which you can get videos on how to build. They are essentially 1 function for the range, 1 function for the splitter, and 1 function for an easy jig, which I didn't use, but I have the ability. That's why I set it up that way. So I essentially, again, have a 35 function box, which is more than your 32, with authentic switches and buttons. And then, of course, I have the shifter attached to it. So the reason why I went that route, instead of having it as another one of these Quimat boards for the shifter alone, like a lot of guys can do, the main reason why I did it that way is because the game only allows 5 controllers, and what I use is I actually use a Thrustmaster shifter. I'll just pick this up and show you. There's that Thrustmaster shifter right there, and then of course I also have my G27, which is sitting on the ground here. Because I took this apart so that way I could do the video for you guys. Once it's all put back together, I'll probably shoot a quick like 5-second video showing you how it's all set up when it's finished. But anyways, these boards that I use, they're Quimat, however the heck they say it, I don't know, but they're like 10 bucks a piece, 10, 12 bucks, something like that on Amazon. And there are some other brands that are basically identical, but they do the same thing, they're just a different name. But that's how I power this, and there's 3 of them that connect to make this entire box. And then, like I said, I use the shifter, I use the joystick functions, but I use 1 joystick function from each board, because if you do more than 1, you can only push 1 button at a time, which kind of defeats the purpose if you're trying to use a range and a splitter. So in any transmission, whether it be a 18 or 13 speed, 15 speed, any of them, other than your regular 10 speed, it won't work for you to use both range and split. So you have to use only 1 of them. But the nice thing is having 3 different boards, it gives you the ability to do all of it. So I'll just do a quick walkthrough of what I did. Essentially here, how it's set up, so essentially what we have here is we have your main dash panel, whereas if you were driving a mid-90s Kenworth like I used to, it would look semi-similar to this. This isn't perfect, obviously, but it represents it pretty well, I think, and I really like it. What I also did, and this right here is controlled by 2 boards. And then this down here is, of course, an ignition, plus I have lights attached to it, because a lot of those trucks, I think the box truck that I used to drive had that was also a mid-90s Kenworth, or late 90s Kenworth, had the lights right next to here. A lot of your real tractor trailers will end up having like 4 switches for lighting, but the game's not set up that way. And then up here are your game buttons, which in a lot of trucks they'll put like a radio or something on the top of the dash, but in this case it just makes it easier to kind of mimic that with some push buttons. So of course I have escape, and then here we had I think this was map, this was trailer attach, and then this one here is enter function. So like if I go to a gas station, I can fill up by holding that. And then you have your F5, 6, 7, and 8, and that, that's how you actually get your map set up, or your tractor information, or any one of those. All in the little screen in the truck, or the little mini map, as you would call it, mini nav, however you want to say it. But anyways, another thing that I did is, besides the fact that these are all actual switches out of a tractor trailer, this is a generic ignition, which I'll go over a little bit, and also these are not actual brake, or not an actual brake setup. The actual brake setup is like $200 and something, and the problem with that is then you end up with something I had to hack apart after spending $200 and some odd on it. So I personally felt that I could do it a lot better. So what I ended up doing was getting 2 differential pull switches, or differential engagement pull switches from, I believe, Tractors, and screwing these onto it, and I'll show that here in a little bit. And then these are, of course, buttons that actually came in a lighting kit for cop cars from one of my customers that, was a customer now. They're one of my vendors for the business that I own now. And they had a bunch of these buttons that come from lighting packages for cop cars, but they use different switches. So I was able to pick some of these up. You can get them at Ace for like $5 at most. They're not that bad. Then this here is actually a tarp switch for a tractor, for an actual trailer. The wipers are kind of a pain to do because you can't use a real wiper switch. It's not easy because they've got the potentiometer in there, and of course the game doesn't recognize that. It just recognizes positions. I believe it's intermittent wipers, then slow, then fast, and then off. So basically I have the up and the down function, and that's it. So anyways, I'll start to delve into it. I'll just kind of show you how it all works and how all that goes. Let's see if I can get this position. Oh, that's right. Let me show how it's hooked up. So, being that I have 3 of those boards, which are all run by USB, of course you have the 3 power wires coming out, right? This is actually for the shifter, which I'll explain a little bit more. Essentially, I wanted a shifter that could be disconnected and reconnected easily, so I used a Cat 5e cable with this bridge right here, and all of my shifters will be wired that way, so that way I can switch the shifters out, whether I have a 13 speed or an 18 speed or any of that. You can just use the 18 speed, but I want to kind of, once I get the sim rig and everything, I want this to almost turn into something where I can teach people how to drive a tractor. And I like to have the different types of shifters in order to do that. Even though I may not use them much, it'll just make me feel better and I'll enjoy it more. So anyways, this right here is a four spot USB guy. It leaves a 4th spot, which is great because that's where I plug my actual shifter, my TH8, into to connect it to everything. But only 3 of them will be used for the box itself. There's 1, 2, and 3 in there, and then of course there's the actual connection that will go right through. And I just have this Velcroed here. It sticks on pretty well. So far it's done pretty dang good. The few times that I've hooked this up before I had to take it down, fix stuff. So anyways, let's get to showing you the insides, how this all works. So, let's see, looks to me like, let's see if we can get better visuals on it. There we go. Maybe I might have to zoom in a little bit. Normally I use all screws, but of course I'm doing this to make sure that I can take it apart for you guys, so that way I can show you exactly what's going on here. So this right here is the inside of the top. This is the first board that runs both these buttons here and also the bottom where the ignition and all that is. And I will show you how that's set up too. If you look in here, this right here is that cord for the shifter. And like I was talking, let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. Like I was talking about, you see one of these right here is hooked up to that joystick. The other two, what I ended up doing, you can see the connectors right here at the bottom, at the bottom left here. Those were actually from one of the other boards. You'll see I have a lot of experience with soldering, especially with little tiny things like N-scale locomotives, because I do sound in those. So I was able to disconnect the parts on the board. These guys right here, I was able to disconnect them so that way I could run it to another board, so I could make an extension without having to cut and solder more wires and all of that as much. It was just easier, so that's why I did that off of one of the boards that, they're all custom made. This is basically a custom thing. I have no interest in worrying about whether they need to go back to factory use, so I basically did that so I could extend them down to the other 2 boards that are in here. But anyways, other than that, you can see the 12 different function spots that are plugged in here. It's really simply done. I did it the way that I did it, so that way everything was real easy. Like you can see, these 2 wires go to this button, one button. I can't see that very well, sorry guys. These 2 wires here, right, go to this one button right there. Now, they were too small to fit in these, so what I did is I wrapped them around the tab, and then I slid this over the top, which pinched it together, and now they get full power. Made it to where I didn't have to do a lot of soldering, and to be honest, some of it wouldn't solder together. It kept sliding off, so I decided instead of having issues with it, I'd just do it this way, and now it's all this way, and now it's all easy and fully removable. So it's actually pretty simple stuff. And then of course, here's your power cord to those Quimat boards now, to one of them anyway. So I drill my hole in here, and then I actually cut the cable for it, and I slide it to the hole, and it almost clips in there. I'll show you that here in a minute. But I mean, that's as simple as they are to put them together. What you're also going to find, here we'll just run this back down. What you're also going to see is in here, let's see if I can, you can see where this guy is. This is actually the function from the lower board, which you'll see when we open up the big one, where that wire runs across it. Basically, it comes out right in here, and then I ran it over to the side to make sure I had the functions in the right spot. But that's how that works. That's how it's all set up. It's nice and simple. Yeah, it looks kind of like a spaghetti group of wires, spaghetti wires or rat's nest, but in all actuality, it's all pretty easily deciphered and put in there and set up so that it's easy enough for me to figure. Alright, so okay, so next in here, this is the other quote-unquote rat's nest looking thing. Now this is the actual ignition that, like we were talking about. Sorry, I've got this thing on an office chair, so it'll turn if I accidentally bump it. But I've got all the wiring on here. What I ended up doing, if you watch an AM Studios video, and I'll try and connect those videos on here so that way you can see what I'm comparing to what I'm trying to show you differently. Because all the guys that I've seen generally either using an Arduino, or if they're using these, they don't really explain very well, or they don't do like I did and do a multiple of 3, so that way I can create exactly what I want. But anyways, so this is an actual universal ignition. Now this should be a red wire coming from the battery. Now I made the mistake and wired these backwards, which caused me issues, such as I went to set the box and I went to here, which is your normal ignition, or to accessory, and I'll show you why it works that way, but and it would light up both sides, not just the one. And it's because I was putting a ground to the battery and not power. So you actually have to make sure that you're putting power to battery and then ground to the other sections. So this wire here should be gray, which is what I had because I couldn't get black. So this is wired both to the accessory and ignition spot on here. So you can't see it very well, but there's one here and then there's one over on this side, and I have them in chain. And then this one here is a separate one. Where is it? I believe it's this right here, is to the starter, to the actual starter here. And both of those should be gray or black, basically for ground, and that should be red for power. You'll see when I get to the main part of the box that I actually switched where they go to, so that way this is actually a power wire and all of these are different grounds, or 2 different grounds I should say. But in this case, in order to wire this, you would put one that connects to your accessory, your ignition and your accessory slot, right? And then of course you have that top one as a starter, so when you turn it, it starts the vehicle. And as long as you wire it properly, it will work exactly like any other starter would. Works out pretty freaking awesome. And I'll link the video for AM Studios. They just happen to have the colors switched in theirs, even though they were right. And of course they didn't acknowledge the accessories spot, but that's this one here. But I wanted it to be authentic, so I just had it go there. It wasn't any extra work. And what I did was I soldered these wires to the actual crush washers and then tightened these down, which I probably could have done as they did, but I didn't want to, so I didn't. And then of course, so you've got that, and then of course you've got these ones all connected also, and being that they're like this one's just a momentary and this one's an actual switch, there really isn't much to it. It's basically 4 functions in here and 8 over here to make your 12. So I don't know if you have any questions on this. I'm gonna patch this up and we're gonna open up the middle And then if you have any questions, of course, like anything else, you're more than welcome to put them in the comments, and I'll answer anything that I can think of. Because really the whole reason why I'm doing this video is to help people who might be in the same boat that I'm at, where they may want to do something different than what you can just go buy commercially. Not that there's anything wrong with buying it commercially, but if you want to do something completely custom, I'm hopefully empowering people to do so on their own, or to have someone who does know how to do this do it for them. There's absolutely nothing wrong with buying something that's ready-made set up, or paying for someone to customize it, but I just really like doing it myself because it's cheaper and I can do exactly what I want the way I want it, so that way there's no question that I'm going to get everything I ask for. Anyways, so here is the big guy. Let's back up. Alright, so let's go like that, because I'm thinking I'm going to zoom in a little bit once I get this all opened up. And then you can see how I had everything set up. One thing to note, a lot of the hardware, not what I'm unscrewing now, but a lot of the actual hardware was purchased at like an ACE. ACE Hardware is, I think, where I got all of it. I'm up here in Anchorage, Alaska, so you might have better options down in the States or Canada or wherever you're watching this from. But here in Alaska, we have only so many options, so we kind of take advantage of what we can when we can. But they definitely had everything I needed, which is also kind of a Radio Shack. But what's funny is with these boards, the Radio Shack screws don't actually fit because they're too big, but you can go into their hardware section and they do have smaller screws that will. As for the exact size, I don't remember. I'm sure I could look it up at some point if somebody was really curious. But if you bring one of the boards with you to ACE, you can try them all and you can see how you want to set it up. See if it works for you the way you want it to. Essentially, this is how I have the other boards set up. Let's see if I can show you what I was talking about with the way I set this. You can see where the parts are missing here, because I wanted to essentially make those connectors right here. You can see where they're disconnected, but other than that, these are basically just the same exact board I showed you. All three of them were the identical boards. Now, one of the things you're gonna see here is I have a couple of ways that I set it up. Of course, I have them wire tied together because I wanted to make sure, zip tied together, so I wanted to make sure I had everything organized and set up. I did run the power cord in between on both sides, on this side here, and then this one I actually ran. This is the actual wiring harness, quote unquote, that goes up to this part up in here. And as you see on here, you'll see some spots where it's like, here's let's see, that's red to red. There you go. Red to black, where I reset it. And of course, this right here, where it's a gray wire, but yet, if you look up here near the top, you can't see it very well, there's going to be red in there attached to it, as I rewired it, so that way it operated properly. It wasn't a huge deal, but if I want it to work perfectly, you got to make sure you do it right. And that's literally all I did with this. As you can see, here's the one wire for the right here that goes into this one. That's for the Easy Jake that I haven't hooked up. This one here is actually for the splitter, and then the other one in there, as you saw, was for the range. So that allows this to be a fully functioning 35 button box with another 3 functions for that shifter. And it's all done relatively the same. These down here are just screwed in with the wire in it, wrapped around the screw, and then I screw them in. The rest of these are just pressed in like before, and that way there really isn't any issue. And I just split this up in a way that I knew would work for me. As you can see, I had that set up a certain way, and then this one here is set up a certain way. So now it's actually really organized and easy to get to everything. Like I said, this just goes up in here and then runs into that board. So yeah, and then of course the mount here, this mount is actually right here, is from my wheel setup. Over here, it actually mounts to right here. As you can see, the two screws are right here. So it's actually quite simple. Like I said, all of it is relatively simple stuff. It's just getting it all set up the way you want it. There are some things that aren't accurate, like the way the lighting is set up and that, because of course it's a game, not like the real trucks that have 4 different switches, one for your trailer, one for your truck, one for your headlights, one for your high beams. This one you just have high beams and then you have light options. Would be nice to set it up differently, but that's okay. Same thing with the pull switches. So these are actually, let's see if I can get this on here. Okay, these are actual differential pull switches. Like I was talking about before, they're obviously not the air brakes like I had hoped, except that, you know, they were $200 to buy the air brake system just for me to hack it up. Nah, I'm good. That's just way too much money to spend when you can essentially take the accurate product and apply a little bit of ingenuity, and now you have something that will stay. So if you give me a second, I'll hook this up here, and then I'll actually show you how that one is done, because I was really curious and I couldn't find anything online about how to make those work. Alright, so this is just a pull switch like anything else. So you pull it out. Essentially what I did, this is an actual parking brake pull switch for a tractor trailer. And there's a little, I can't remember, I want to say they call it a crush nut, but it's essentially a piece of rubber with threading in it that threaded right onto that switch. So what I did is I put it in here backwards, cut the end off, and then drilled a hole in it, and this actually came with a little pin that you can put in it. So I drilled that hole and then I pressed this pin into the rubber. So now it's fairly solid. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's pretty solid. It operates like it's supposed to. So then of course I drilled a hole and wired this. Now all I have to do is screw it on. Of course it's going to fight with me because I have the video running. You just screw it down to not quite all the way. Push it in. There we go, it's semi-tight, and make it not quite that much. Yeah, so that way it's nice and tight on there, and that way it functions as an actual pull brake switch. Now the game doesn't allow this one to work also. The trailer brake is actually a Johnny bar that's usually under a steering wheel. But it's there for whenever they decide to add that functionality. So either way, that's pretty much how I built my box. If there are any questions or comments, just please leave them in the comment bar. I'll respond to everything I see when I can. And hopefully you guys have a great time and happy trucking, guys. If you have any questions, like I said, leave it in the comments section, and hopefully I can help you out. Thanks a lot. Have a great day. Alright guys, and this right here is the system completely installed, hooked up and ready to go. Of course the computer isn't hooked up to the TV or anything, so I'm not going to play it right now. However, it is ready to be rehooked up to the computer, and the computer to be hooked up to the TV, and then it is literally good to go. I might have to reset some extra stuff just to get it all finished, but usually it works pretty flawlessly once you have it all set up. I just moved some stuff around before I did the video, so of course I'm going to have to double check it. But, you know, I use the SV mapper to make the toggles themselves work. If there's some interest, I may put that down in the bottom of the, or down in the description also, just to try and make it easier so you guys can kind of follow along with the way I did it, to increase the fun of your experience. If you have any questions, again, put them in the comments, and have a great time and happy trucking. Thank you.